Hello and welcome to this videocast for subscribers to davidicke.com. Well, I'm going to continue the theme this week of perception programming, not least because it's the foundation of everything. What we can be persuaded or manipulated to believe and perceive dictates our responses and our behavior in relation to everything. And this week I'm going to look at the media, the mainstream media, and how few people own it, and basically how it works, and how, by the way, ever fewer people are owning it, as media ownership and power is concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, with massive implications for human freedom. A thing you hear all the time is, you never believe what you read in the newspapers. But then people do. And they should believe some of it, because some of it is true. But a lot of it is complete mendacity, lies. And the bit in between is either subtly or totally slanted to the point where the facts are no longer what the facts were when they started, because the angle, the bias has been skewed to the point where the facts tell a very different story to what they should be telling if we were looking at what is happening in the world from a unbiased point of view. And another thing that people tend to ask when you talk about media control is, are you saying then that there's someone standing over the shoulder of every journalist telling them what to write? Well, in some cases, something like that does happen. Yes, this is how the story's going to be written. This is the angle you're going to take. Not even sometimes, that's very, very common. But there are many other ways that get the media to portray the world in ways that suit the system. And one of them is that most journalists are products of the system. They've been through the education system. They've been through, most of them these days, through university. And they've got the system's version of everything. And through that same system have come those that went on to become scientists and doctors and politicians and all these other pillars of the system. So when the mainstream media is looking at a story, it is going to, and does, invariably take the system as its point of reference from which it is observing and judging events in the world. Example, if a doctor says something about health, they are seen as credible, even though the biggest killer in America, for instance, is the treatment. Various aspects of the treatment, doctor error, drug reactions, botched operations, and diseases and infections caught in hospital. Put that lot together and you have the biggest killer in America is the friggin' treatment. But they're doctors. So when they speak on health, then they are the reference point. If you're not a doctor, but you are successfully treating people for ailments from another understanding of the way the body works, then you are, by reflex action, a crank or a quack. So this system bias is built into the psyche of most journalists. When a scientist speaks, then that's the point of reference, not investigating the validity of what's said, but he's a scientist, she's a scientist, must know what she's talking about. Well, not all of them do. I mean, all the way through um, history, we've had scientists saying this is how it is. Oh, he's a scientist, he's told us how it is. And it turns out, further down the line, not to be how it is at all. And the cranks and the strange ones, they were actually right. But even so, the media won't reflect that in time, in real time, as they say, because the system is the point of reference for everything. And then we have news that comes from the same source, even though it is read by or reported by multiple newspapers and television radio stations the world over. There's a video I saw on YouTube which has a series of newsreaders from different stations telling a story. I think it's about Easter bunnies. And they're all reading it word for word the same, even though they're supposed to be different stations. And this comes from news agencies. For those that don't know about the media, news agencies are stationed around the world, and their reporters supply endless outlets, newspapers, radio, television, with stories. And what they receive is the same story. So basically, you've got a media which is putting out different news bulletins and different papers and versions of the story, but the source of the story is all the same. What if the person that wrote that story is either mistaken or massively biased in the way the story is written and the way the facts are put together, or alleged facts? Everybody is wrong. And I worked at the BBC. They used to have this thing called the rip and read. I don't know if they still do. It's probably high-tech stuff now. Principle will still be the same. And what happens is every half an hour or hour, in all the different BBC outlets all over the country, whether it's national or local or whatever, the printer would print out the news headlines and a news bulletin. And it's called rip and read, or was, because someone would then rip it off, walk into the studio and read it. And so they were all reading the same stories from the same one source again. And I was in a studio in South Africa on a mainstream radio show. And on the hour, the lady came in, sat next to me, and read the news. And at the end of it, on air, I just said to her, "Excuse me, can you tell me how you know any of that is true?" And she was speechless because she didn't. She just read it. And you see these people in news studios and radio, and they're sitting there confidently reading it as if this is true, and I've got a great intellect and I'm telling you the news, this is how it is. It's all an act. It's like a performance, and they don't necessarily know anything about what they're talking about, but most of the time they haven't got a clue. And then you look at where journalists get their information from. There is some investigative journalism that still goes on within the parameters of the system. But most, research, in many cases, comes from reading the morning papers and watching the rolling news programs on the newsroom telly. In other words, you've got um, journalists telling journalists what's going on, and then journalists then repeat what they're told is going on. It's all repeating, it's all repetition. The whole system is repetition. Look at it. What do doctors do? They repeat what they learned at medical school. They repeat what the last drug rep told them when he came around to sell them more drugs for people. What are journalists doing? They're repeating. You see, we have this system now of soundbite news that came in. I mean, when I first started in journalism and started in broadcasting, there was still some substance going on. There were still some lengthy interviews. There was still an opportunity to get into the meat of something. But then out of America came soundbite television. I remember I was there in the changeover. It became a nightmare trying to get anything of substance because they wanted it all snappy and short. And in that way, you can't tell the story. You can't tell some major story with its implications and its background and the dots connected to bring it about. So you have a big understanding of what you're looking at and what this particular story is all about. It's just bang, 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 bang. And in that way, it's all superficial. And it's meant to be because we're not supposed to know in detail what's going on. We just have to just take that basically the headline of the story, and that's our perception, our image of the way things are. And then what's come in now is this ludicrous situation where newsreaders are interviewing reporters about what's going on. We're not having substantial interviews with the people who are actually involved. We're having interviews with reporters. So after, story after story, if you watch a news bulletin, the BBC comes to mind immediately. They do these little kind of soundbite little short pieces which can't get into any substance at all. And then they come back to the newsreader, and then they go to the reporter on the ground. Now, unless that correspondent has been there for a long time and has seen the way things are, and is a journalist rather than somebody who's just reporting quite like an actor, but that kind of thing. If they're a proper journalist and they've been in that area and they've got experience of the story they're talking about, well, fair enough, talk to them. But most of the time, you see people, reporters, they turn up at a story. They're pretty bloody clueless about what's happening. And so where do they get their information from? Official sources. You see, people all the time, political correspondents and stuff like that, standing in front of cameras, confidently saying this is how it is. And you look at what they're saying, and what they're telling you is what official sources have told them. And there is a comfort zone in journalism, and that is staying within the system, staying within the official version of events, because it's easier that way. If you stay within the official version of events, and you can't really go wrong because it's all official, and you're not going to get challenged on it. You start questioning the official version of events. You start really questioning the official version you've been given, and suddenly, whoa, you've got trouble.